1 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Grace Atkins. I'm the User Engagement Librarian here at the University of Missouri. And I'm also kind of running point on OER initiatives, specifically an OER interest group that we have on campus right now that is open to anyone interested in OER. Today's going to be pretty informal. I'd like to kind of have a conversation about these various going-ons with OER, which I know will be a little difficult with some of our audience being online and some being in person, but I'll try my best to repeat questions that happen in the room. Real quick, I just kind of want to get a feel for who my audience is today. I see that there are some librarians here. Is anyone faculty? And then students? All right.
Town person.
Town person.
Or the acronym OER.
Okay, great. Well, that is where we will begin then. Go ahead and get started. All right, OER stands for Open Educational Resources, and it is currently Open Education Week internationally right now. It's the last day. So this workshop will cover, it'll define what open educational resources are, why you should use them in your classroom, why you can create your own, where you can find them, and finally, just what's going on with OER support on campus right now. So what is OER? Here's a really long definition from the Hewlett Foundation, but basically it is any material you use in your classroom to help with learning. So I think I'll just go ahead and go to the next slide actually. That can be a textbook, but it can also be lesson plans, quizzes and tests, syllabi, lectures, video, audio, anything you use while you're teaching. Any questions there? Sometimes people will use open textbooks synonymously with open educational resource, which is fine, but as you see here, it's so much more than just textbooks. The main driving factor behind using OERs is how it affects students. So this chart shows the student concern that a lack of a textbook will impact their grades. Textbook costs are so high that some students just go without and are very aware of how not having a textbook will hurt their grade in the course. This led to the library really looking into OERs and giving a presentation at the Celebration of Teaching last May that's held here every year. And this is where I have these figures from, and they've been confirmed by several sources. So this is the average cost a student pays per year for textbooks and supplies. And on a student budget, $1,200 plus is quite a bit of money. 48% of students surveyed said that the cost of textbooks impacts how many and which classes they took each semester. We had a representative from OpenStax, which is a free textbook nonprofit group out of Rice University, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later. But she had a really great anecdotal, well not great, but she had an anecdotal story about a veteran standing up and saying, I really need to take this course at the university, but the textbook is over $300. I only have so much in my stipend. So I guess I'll take it next semester, and that'll put me behind. So this really does affect students, what classes they can take, how many. And the final figure here, 65% of students said that they had decided against buying a textbook because it was too expensive. And then that just creates a lot of anxiety for the rest of the semester on how you'll access the material. So we also had some librarians and students go to this SEC workshop. It was the Academic Collaboration Workshop. Ann Barker is in the picture, and she's here right now. Can you talk a little bit about what that was, actually?
Yeah, this is interesting. You know, we do the SEC largely as a sports group, but they have an academic component as well to try to collaborate more on more scholarly activities besides just the athletics. So this was a competitive grant that brought in representatives from each of the SEC campuses, and they wanted a couple of librarians or administrators and then a grad student and an undergrad from each campus. And it was looking both at open educational resources from a student point of view and then also looking at open access, which dominates the lives of the faculty and graduate students more. So those are our two student representatives. They're still around, and they did a dynamic job. They motivated, they organized all the other students who were there and actually passed resolutions on all the campuses regarding these grants.
So the short version of what Ann Barker just shared with us, students within SEC institutions came together to work on OER and open access initiatives. And what came out of that here and at several of these universities was the passing of resolutions. So the graduate student government and the undergraduate student government came together to pass a joint resolution supporting the investigation of open educational resources. Now, this was passed in 2014. We're in 2016 now, and we're still very much in the investigation phase. And I'm hoping that as a university we'll be moving forward and actually implementing more OER use. So, finally, why is OER important for students? It really comes down to equity, leveling the playing field, making sure that all students have access to the course material they need. They all are in a position to sign up for the courses that they want to take and to do as well as their peers in those courses. From a faculty perspective, there's a lot of challenges to finding and using OERs, but I think this is all getting quite a bit better. Some challenges from the faculty perspective have been just discovery where to find quality OERs, because some are definitely better than others. It does take more time to seek these out, prepare your course, and then support mechanisms do need to be in place, including instructional technology needs, digital storage, and I think we are having more and more support on campus, and I will be talking about that a bit later. And then also, sometimes they just hear from their students that they prefer print, which most OERs are digital because it's an accessibility issue. But we have more options now for taking those digital materials and putting them into print. So I feel like that's becoming less and less of an issue now. In a survey that just wrapped up on faculty perspectives on digital materials and OER course materials, this was done by the Independent College Bookstore Association, and Mizzou also participated in this survey. Here were some of the results from that. 36% of faculty surveyed said they know a little bit about OER, but they have not reviewed or used materials. 39% said they have never used OER materials. 11 have used one or more OER materials for a course. 10% reviewed but decided not to use them. And 4% have reviewed these materials and have made materials available. So this kind of shows that students are very much for this, but faculty aren't quite there yet, just in terms of being familiar with OER. But that being said, there are a lot of reasons for using them we've discussed with student needs, but also for creating your own. There's a lot of academic freedom that comes with that, and here it's laid out in 5 R's of openness. You can retain better copyright of your own content. You can reuse, or anyone can reuse your content in whatever way you specify in your own copyright licensing. And then you can revise OER materials. Usually it depends on how they're set up, but most of the time you have the right to adapt or modify them for however best fits into your teaching and your course. You can remix and combine with other OER, mash them up, and then redistribute. You have the power to determine who can use what. So there's a lot of benefits there. in creating your own. We've talked about time and effort and support being an issue, but when you go through all of that, you end up with more academic freedom than if you had not gone this route. So just to recap there, in terms of academic freedom, it provides faculty with more choices for their courses, allows better, more defined permissions for editing and adaptation. And then sometimes you'll run into a resource that's labeled OER, but check to see if there really is a cost or something involved, because we're seeing that more and more, that some groups are saying they're open access or they're OER, but maybe it's just an affordability thing, or just a piece of it is free but not all of it. But the resources that we've outlined and recommend are OER. So as OER improves, different groups who produce these materials and distribute these materials are working to improve in the areas that faculty have outlined, making these easier to find and use, establishing sustainable models to ensure quality, because that's definitely a major concern, and then just making sure that what is produced fits well into curricula. So I've laid out that statistic of how faculty aren't quite as familiar with OER, but that's not to say that universities aren't doing things. Plenty of universities are doing quite a bit, whether that's kind of opening their classroom, sharing their resources through accessible MOOCs like MIT has done, or just having more OER outreach and information available. And I think libraries have done a lot of great work in that, and so have instructional technology offices. Bookstores, university bookstores have done quite a bit with digital course packets, ebooks, implementing into LMSs, learning management systems, partnering with instructional technology offices to do that. And our bookstore here actually offers a ton of different options for accessing course material, which I can talk a little bit more about there. So right now, even our university is doing a little bit in all of these areas, but we could be doing more in the future. We did have a representative, Nicole Finkbeiner from OpenStax, come visit us on Monday to kick off Open Education Week, and they produce peer-reviewed quality OER textbooks. And some of the statistics she shared, 22% of degree-granting institutions in the U.S. are using at least one OpenStax book. So that's 1,700 plus schools, and as you can see, it's quite a range from community colleges to Ivy Leagues, state colleges to private institutions. And OpenStax is out of Rice University, so it's a nonprofit that grew out of Rice. Here we have 3 faculty members using an OpenStax book. One is over at Kansas City, and then Ian Zimmerman and Karen King are both here. And they're in psychology, statistics, and physics. And I think the savings that they've been able to do have been fantastic. So you can see here that these 2 faculty members in 3 courses have impacted almost 400 students, and that has saved those students almost $39,000 in taking these courses, which is 1% of our population here, roughly. So imagine if we got that up to 15% of Mizzou students using at least one open textbook, and that could save over $500,000 per year, and that's just 15% using one. So if we increased OER usage, then I think it could make a huge impact here for student cost. And I think based on conversations with other institutions involved in this work, it's really going to come down to supporting faculty, making sure that we provide the services and the resources they need to find OERs, fit them into their courses, and help them create their own OERs. I would like to see us providing some kind of incentive as a university or reward, but I know that we're in kind of a tough spot right now, budget-wise. But I think there are still things we could do to recognize faculty and reward them for using open educational resources. And also, to be successful in this area, it's going to take several approaches happening simultaneously, which I think there are little things happening right now all over campus, and that's why the OER interest group is so important, that we can come together and share out on what all is going on and work together to move forward with making education more affordable for our students. So that being said, I've compiled everything I know about OER going on campus into a guide. I'll go ahead and open that up, and everyone attending online, you don't really have to follow me for this part. I would encourage you to just explore this guide while we're discussing it. So it's pretty straightforward. The front page is just more about OER, what it is, why it's important philosophically and cost-wise. And then the second tab here, these are tools that anyone can access. Discovery tools for finding OER resources for your course. Merlot is very good. It's an excellent peer-reviewed collection of OER materials meant for higher education, because some of these discovery tools will also cover elementary and high school, and you want to make sure you're on one that's focused on higher ed. And down a little further, I have OpenStax here at the top for textbook discovery tools, but also college open textbooks, open textbook library. All of these have great collections of open textbooks. And then going back up here, on the side, OER organizations, Open Education Consortium. They're the group that has organized Open Education Week, which is going on right now. So that's a major player in all of this. And these organizations support many of these discovery tools. So those are worth looking into some more and exploring. Resources on campus, not all of these that I've outlined are purely OER support, but they all help reduce cost and increase access to learning materials. So this page, if you're needing to find OERs, use them, create them, just want to know more about them, or if you're working to make your own work openly accessible, or you just want to reduce course material costs for your students, if you have any of those interests or questions, check out this page, because it says what each of these offices, departments, institutions can do for you. So for example, at MU Libraries, we can place materials on course reserves so that they're accessible to every student in that course. We can help you find textbooks in the Merlin catalog. We don't have a ton of textbooks, but we do have some, and we can help you search for those. And then we also have a copyright guide that's been put together by Ann Barker, who's our copyright expert, and we can help you there if you're interested in creating something. We can help you with the licensing. Going back up a bit, ETETMO, that's Educational Technology at Missouri. They do a lot with course redesign. So if you have taught a course for a while, but you want to incorporate more open educational resources, or you want to create some of your own, they can help you with that. And all you have to do is reach out there, ethelp@missouri.edu for more info. MoSpace is our MU institutional repository, and that's where you can place your work if you're interested in having it accessible. And they have different levels of accessibility, I understand. You can make it open to the world, or not all of it. You can talk to them about that. And then the Mizzou store is our bookstore, and they can help you print and bind any digital OER materials for those students who prefer print. And then also their auto access program is fantastic. It makes the course material available through our LMS, which is Blackboard or Canvas, at a cheaper cost than it would be to get the print material. And then they also just in general do a lot of really good work to make sure that students have all of these different options available to them. A student could buy a print book for more, or they could save more on the ebook. They could access it from different ways. So they'll just work with you to make sure that students are able to get the materials and at the cheapest cost possible. And then finally, down here in the corner, our OER interest group is open to anyone in the Mizzou community who's interested in keeping up with OER. We have a listserv that we won't overload you with emails, but we'll keep you informed about what's going on. And then we meet up a few times a semester. For example, when we had that OpenStax representative come visit us, we had a meeting with our interest group about how initiatives on campus can be successful. So that's a really great way to get involved and stay informed. I also have a tab here with the resolution that was passed by the students, so you can read a bit more about why they believe this is important and what they would like us to do. So that is the guide, and I think it's best asset right now, in addition to those discovery tools and organizations, is this Resources on Campus tab that can help you with where to go. And you can always email me. I am down at the bottom of this page. You can email me to join the listserv, but you can also just email me if you have an OER question or aren't quite sure where to go on campus to get support with OER, and I can help you out there. So I will go ahead and open this up to questions. I've thrown a lot of information out at you. We have a lot of librarians in the room. I am interested in knowing where you think the library fits in with OER. Right now, I'm trying to be knowledgeable enough about it that I can point everyone in the right direction to get the support they need or to find the kind of resource they're looking for.
That seems most appropriate to me, because decisions on what text to use are going to lie with the faculty, but it's making it easier for them to find other possibilities and things like that. I will.
That one from online.
Okay.
Are there any organized efforts from state government to produce OER books?
Not that I'm aware of in Missouri. I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, I don't recall either from the conference that I talked about statewide efforts anywhere.
Anne is saying that from the SEC conference, no one was talking about statewide efforts. I mean, I think it's definitely something interesting to bring forward to them, because these numbers don't lie. I mean, the cost savings really add up.
We have another one.
Yeah.
Would you recommend starting with the library's website when looking for OERs as an instructor?
As an instructor, I would definitely check out this guide, but depending on what you're looking for and how you want to use it, ETETMO does a lot with course redesign, and I think they're probably the most helpful in how to fit it into your syllabus, or that's kind of where I would start after just becoming a little more knowledgeable about it. Yeah.
I think OER is great for students, but why is the adoption so slow?
I think there's a lot of reasons for that. So man, how to even go about unpacking that one. I talked about some of the challenges, and that definitely slowed it down, but something that also happened in the early days of OER, the quality wasn't there. So I think that faculty who have known about this for a while, or anyone who have known about this for a while, kind of think, oh, that cheap free stuff, and now it's much more high quality. So I think it kind of got off to a rocky start, and then it just is more work. It is work to redesign your course and to find different materials, and then creating your own. That's quite an effort. So I think it's just a little more difficult, and that's why it's been slower. But I think support offices have recognized that and are doing more. For example, we're trying to do more here at the library, and so that'll make it easier for faculty, and maybe adoption will increase. And that survey I talked about with faculty perceptions of digital resources and open educational resources, that was so recent. So just in 2016, that's kind of where we are right now. And as more and more people talk about it, become aware, have better resources, who knows, it might just take off.
There are a lot of sort of allied educational, like government agencies have, like CDC has a lot of information on the public health and lend links to other groups that are studying such and such. And similarly with USGS has maps and the Lewis and Clark Trail and all kinds of related issues to geology.
Right. So we're talking about...
I know what you're saying is more of what's...
No, I was just going to repeat what you were saying for the microphone. Because I think that's a great point, that there are government groups, nonprofit groups, just that make their information available online. CDC was one that you said. And absolutely, and that's where I think talking to someone like Etmo about, there's all this information from the CDC. How can I put that into my course? How can I take that information and use it? So yeah, I think there's so much out there, and it just comes down to kind of wrangling it. Yeah.
Do most OER materials stay OER, or do they ever move into the for-profit sector of publishing?
So the question is, do most OER materials stay free, or do they eventually move into kind of a publishing model? Well, I think ones that, I don't know,
It could be a challenge if something is free and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, everyone wants this book, we can sell it. That could be a challenge.
Sure. So a challenge of some material's really great, we should be making more money off of this. Yeah, that's absolutely a concern. I think a bigger concern actually is nonprofits are doing this work. What if they go under? Now this textbook that I've lobbied my department to adopt, that I've really gotten behind, is just gone, or its quality has gone downhill, or whatever. And I think that's where a lot of these groups have, rather than trying to be all things to all people or having these huge repositories, they've really narrowed their focus to, rather than these 10 textbooks that we can't really sustain or maintain, we have one really good one. So I think that that's a concern that was happening and is being dealt with a little bit better. But this is new territory, so kind of, who knows? And that's one of the many hurdles in going this route, for sure. Tara, did you have a question? Oh, okay.
Checking back on the whether the states have mandated anything, I think Nicole Finkbeiner said that they do some lobbying at the federal level, but I don't recall hearing the details. about that, if OpenStax is promoting, or if there's another group that's talking with the Department of Education.
Yeah.
Something like that. Do you recall anything about that? Or?
So going back to lobbying and working with government initiatives on this, our representative from OpenStax, Nicole Frank-Feiner, she did say that they do some lobbying at the federal level, but she didn't really follow up on that with any other details. And I could always ask her. I'm just not sure where that side of things would be right now, but people are lobbying.
Yeah, I don't know if Spark also does some things. I know they're more of their open access initiatives, but I think they may have an OER component as well.
So Spark does open access lobbying. And these things go hand in hand. I mean, if you're creating an OER, that could even just be an open access journal article that you also use in your class. So there's huge overlap there. Any questions from online or any input on any of this?
We do have a couple of comments.
Okay.
The follow-up from the Why is the Adoption So Slow? Was a comment, quality is an issue, that's why organized efforts from government, from university libraries, from professors are important. And then another comment has a link for OER discovery with a new partnership between OpenStax, NACS, the National Association of College Stores, and Dover Publishing. There's a website link.
Oh, okay.
Customization tool for instructors to build their own textbook using a library of materials.
Not really OER, but I think that Northwest Missouri State has tried to kind of rein in textbook prices by getting their faculty to select books that they're not going to switch out. So if you get a book, you've got to choose from it for 3 years. And I think they do other things. They I think they buy the books and then rent them to the students. But it ends up being a lot cheaper than the students buying the books.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other kind of options in addition to OER that accomplish the same goal, which is to decrease the price that students have to pay for textbooks. I don't know if the program's still going on, but this was several years ago.
And that was Northwest?
It was Northwest Missouri State. Yeah,
Missouri State.
Kind of an interesting idea.
So we're talking about other initiatives that bookstores can do to reduce cost, including requiring that a textbook be used a certain number of years so that students can actually sell them back or rent them. And I do think our bookstore does quite a bit of that kind of work. It's just tough. And I know I don't think they actually mandate anything like that, but they do encourage certain things.
I haven't really thought of this as an example of OER, but I know one of the English professors that I work with has been over years building an online anthology with her students. So this works if you're dealing with a period that's prior to 1923, so things are in the public domain. But she's done this now over 3 years. Each year there's a section of the class, and they identify text that can be added to this digital anthology that's done through a wiki, and then they write the commentary around it. So it's gradually growing. So it's an anthology of Victorian short fiction from periodicals and specifically detective stories. But it's kind of interesting to involve the students actually in creating this thing that's sort of growing and then prizes that it could be reused for other classes.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. We're talking about kind of digital humanities projects that students using materials in the public domain, putting them into anthologies that are accessible. And in grad school and undergrad, I've done those kind of projects, but it runs into that none of them are accessible now. I don't know what the deal is, like the semester's over, or maybe it's just not as up to date as it was, or the professor moved on to another institution and took it off of our server and now it's just gone. So I've always taken screenshots of that kind of work because I just don't trust it to be there in a semester, in a year. And that falls in line with what we were talking about earlier with, you know, you don't want to invest everything in these materials that aren't going to be around.
Which might be another role for the institutional repository to
Yeah.
some of these things so they're more have more longevity.
Yeah, I think that could definitely be a role for the institutional repository to include more student work, especially those wiki-based projects, which I think are more and more common. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Janice, did you have a question?
Well, not a question. I was just going to say I helped a few faculty members locate material online, particularly for online classes, and a few publishers have come out with really good educational material. Nature Publishing Group comes to mind. They've really done some really nice, they're not exactly textbooks, but it's like an entire unit on a particular subject, and they sometimes link to articles freely that they published. And then also I've found, sometimes I can locate books, electronic books that we purchased, that I can just add more users to so that they can use the books as textbooks. I mean, a lot of textbook publishers won't libraries offer online versions of textbooks because they want to sell the individual subscriptions. But not all books could be used as textbooks for that way, but sometimes that's an option.
Okay. With Nature, how does that work? Because that's a very expensive.
Well, it's just that they, I don't remember the name of the site, they just have like a nature educational site which you can go to, and they've gathered all the material together. It's on particular scientific topics. Now I can't remember what they were, but like molecular biology.
So you don't have to be subscribed to get access to it.
No, it's freely available to everybody.
They're kind of using it as an promotional tool.
Right. I mean, I think they're thinking we're educating the future scientists, and later on
they will buy our
product for our journal. So I think they're thinking of it as an investment in the future.
So we're talking about Nature as an example of a publication that has a free component. But I think this kind of plays interestingly into what Katie was saying about, you know, well, if some sort of free component becomes so good that you can sell it, will it be free tomorrow? Which I'm not saying that's Nature's plan, but happens with software all the time. Yeah, open source software becomes not open.
I remember the OpenStax representative did say that some of the books were originally, you had to purchase them and then they were dropped by the publisher or whatever, or they didn't sign up for another edition and they moved it over to OpenStax. So I guess it can go either way.
Yeah, OpenStax, several of their textbooks they actually bought from somewhere else, and you know did all the necessary copyright. So OpenStax, their textbooks are free. They're electronic versions, and they come in a variety of formats there. The most common, a PDF. And then at our bookstore, you can have that printed and bound at cost, which makes a textbook that would normally be about $200, $300, $1,750, which is fantastic. But all this to say, I think it costs like $500,000 for them to purchase the book, get the rights, get the peer reviewed, have it made. So any cost that they make, a little bit of through printing or whatever, all goes into just creating these works. It's really expensive. So different groups have different models, but it gets complicated. You know, it gets complicated when you cut off a publisher, but it also gets a lot cheaper. I was wondering if anyone had any ideas for what Mizzou should be doing moving forward with OER, because we did talk about it's great to have a simultaneous, a lot of stuff happening at one time, effort going on. I know our student government has some ideas how to move beyond ideals into action, but I'm just curious if anyone here today has any ideas.
We already identified the high enrollment classes that are using common materials.
Was that a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Have we already identified the classes with high enrollment that this would have the biggest impact on? Not that I'm aware of, but now that I've said that, I'm curious if the bookstore is going to chime in and say they have, or if ET@Mo has done that work. The library has not done that work. But yeah, and OpenStax, they don't have, I think they have about 20-ish textbooks, and most of them are STEM or social sciences. I think history was their newest one because usually it's math and science, because those are the high enrollment, major impact, intro-level courses. And the neat thing about OpenStax, just to plug them a bit more, is that you can revise those materials. You can take a chapter or a page or a section and mix it into your own. So it's thinking beyond kind of your standard textbook. And I think more and more courses do that anyway. You know, courses that assign a textbook also have all these other components. And I think back when I was an undergrad, one of the most expensive books I bought was a psych textbook, and the professor maybe used a third of it, you know, and then did his own stuff, which was fine, but if you're just going to use a third of something, maybe use a third of something free, and then start there and work with that. Did anyone chime in about efforts to identify high enrollment, high impact courses? Someone is typing. Any other thoughts on initiatives?
I'm trying to remember again. It seems like with Matt Vega, who was the undergrad student who was dealing with the OER stuff from the SEC conference, and it seems like he was going to do a survey. I can't remember if it was a survey of students or of faculty. It seems like the student government had some kind of idea of doing a survey. I don't know if that ever happened or not. And I think it was on like how much do the textbooks cost, or how much are you spending on textbooks. I can't remember exactly what the survey questions are going to be, but something just to bring people, make the awareness more local.
Right. Yeah, we're talking about doing a local campus-wide survey.
I remember it was on, he was going to include something, to include a question on the course evaluation. To do with the cost of textbooks.
Oh man, that would be so useful.
I don't remember if it actually happened, but it was like the cost, and did you buy it? Did you actually use it? Something like that.
So we're discussing in the standard course evaluation form that goes out for every course at the end of it, having some kind of question of, you know, what was the cost related to this course, and how'd you deal with that? Man, I think that would be great. I wonder what happened with that.
I think I gave him the wrong name. I think it's Ben Vega. They're too big as others. I think I got them switched.
I think it was Ben Vega, yeah, at the SEC. Yeah, I think the students are very passionate about this, but there's high turnover in student government, and then they're not always as plugged in as we are in the library with all these different offices on campus. So I'd like to do more in kind of harnessing the students' energy and desire to do more with OER and in ways that actually reach out. I just think the piece we're really missing right now is faculty. So that's the big one. We've also talked a little bit about how having administrative support behind things like this is really important. Something that Cole talked about a little bit was that there's this kind of misperception that a faculty member would be punished for using an OER. And her examples there had to do with if your department really stands behind a certain textbook, or they just really believe that OERs aren't high quality, that you'll be looked down on for using one. And if you're going up for tenure, you know, you want to be seen well. So that was kind of an issue, and then having administration say this is something we care a lot about, like providing those kinds of incentives, rewarding faculty who do this kind of work, including that in the tenure process. would go a long way. So that's something we're looking at as well. That's kind of a difficult piece to get. And what I would like us to do at the library would be to highlight, I don't know, OER heroes or faculty advocates or people who are doing really good work. I'd like to do more to showcase that, because, I mean, just in the 2 professors we have on this campus, those savings are huge. So, hats off to them.
It'd be a lot of work, but maybe you could be proactive if you could identify survey courses with all these, large people that use the same books, and then find out what those books are and see if they're equivalent OER things, and then go to the professor and say, last semester you taught this class, you're scheduled to teach it in another year or something or other, and these books might be able to supplant the ones you've used, and if you did, it would cost them X amount less money, and it'd save your students so much more money, and promote it that way. I mean, I think they actually have to have something in front of them and see that it would make some kind of impact, rather than to try and persuade people about some vague notion of doing good.
Yeah, right. So we're talking about pinpointing faculty who use these high-cost, high-impact books and reaching out to them directly. So that's something I've been thinking about, mostly because the student government wants to, at least one person, wants to go out and do that, like pinpoint faculty, talk to them. And I think that's the thing to do, but I'm also like, is that the library's job? And I think it could be. It's just kind of like, I don't know, like pushing a certain resource isn't something that I have.
Good job.
I think it could be a joint endeavor, and I think it's
a joint endeavor.
Yeah, like for example, with the bookstore, and look at it more as a service rather than a push.
Yeah.
It's like, here's something that's available. You don't have time to go seek these things out. So here it is. Have a look.
Yeah. No, I think that a joint effort with all of these stakeholders. Yeah.
I'm wondering too, in some of the large survey courses, I wonder, I'm thinking like in the English department, they don't have a common curriculum, so it's not going to be as effective, but they have like one faculty member overseeing a whole cohort of graduate students who are teaching different sections. And I don't know if that's the way it works in the sciences as well. Then it's, talking to the supervisory faculty member, and the graduate students may not be choosing the textbook anyway.
Yeah.
So it might be hit the one person, and then that disseminates over a whole lot of different sections, potentially.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
No. I also wonder about, just with like the current financial situation on campus and just the current climate in general, I would think people would be pretty receptive to this, but also maybe not, because it takes effort to actually do this. So if anyone has any input on that, how successful they think OER.
Well, I think you have to give them equivalents.
Okay.
I really think you do. You have to do the work for them and say, these are equivalents. And then they can look at that and say, yes, they're equivalents, or no, they're not equivalents. I want to go with what I want to go with.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that the faculty are so overworked now that they don't really have time to investigate any of these things, much as they would like to.
So you're trying to have generic drugs and books.
Right. Yeah.
I think that there's nothing wrong with that in a lot of disciplines.
Right.
So the comparison was just made of generic, like pharmaceutical drugs, which I think is a good comparison.
I think particularly if we could, if you can tie to that demonstrating how much savings for students, that's a nice thing to be able to show the state legislature too.
Yeah.
We've made these efforts to save money for your kids.
So we're saying that maybe our role in this is to do this investigatory work and actually get the figures on paper, and then just show that to faculty, leaders, government leaders, people, decision makers, just have it all laid out for them. Yes or no?
That would probably impact retention.
Yes, that's a huge
right
piece
now.
that I didn't touch on. Retention rates go way up when using OERs, and that's because you can take the classes you need to take and you won't struggle because you'll have the materials. I can't remember what Nicole's figure was, but it was, you know, students believe they do as well or better using these materials, and I mean, as well is great, and then better is even better. So, what were you going to say, Janet?
Oh, I was going to say, somewhere in my files, I have an article from a couple of years ago about the University Librarian, it might have been Oklahoma State, I'm not sure, who worked very closely with the bookstore. They got the textbook list, and they went through all the books being used in classes to see how many either were freely available because they were literary books that were copyright, or whether they were books they could buy electronically and provide access. And then they would put little stickers at the bookstore on the shelf where the book was and say, you have options here, and then give the options. Of course, that would take more money from the library to add all these electronic books. And for some textbooks, as I said, the publishers aren't going to let libraries provide electronic copies because they're like print small. They usually can't, the libraries can't buy an electronic copy. But for some, I think particularly for literature and probably a lot of sociology, history, they could provide alternatives for the students so they didn't have to buy as many textbooks. So that could be something we could do, but it would probably take, again, a little extra money in the book budget to do.
Yeah. My understanding with those public domain literary materials is that the bookstore does quite a bit with their auto access program to just get those available through the LMS, or if they're printed, have them be printed at cost. I think I'm looking at you because I thought maybe you were there in that meeting. Yeah, but maybe you weren't. So sorry. but they've
tell where your eyes are going.
But they've brought some examples of public domain works that they had just bound, you know, printed and bound at cost, so it's just like $2, you know, for yeah. But I'm assuming that goes through their auto access program. It would just be, you know, if they're just taking it from Project Gutenberg or something, and then just pushing it through the LMS.
I know for a lot of the English literary departments, we've got literature online databases, a lot of canonical texts. They're not necessarily public domain, but they're critical editions. We can just link right to them from the LMS. So I think a lot of the English faculty do that. From their syllabus to that. It's not really open, but it's available.
Well, unless there's anything else, I think we can go ahead and wrap up a little early. But I really appreciate all the ideas you've shared today. I think that's good moving forward. Yes?
We just have a comment.
Oh, a comment.
Some of the adopted books by faculty that happen to be public domain, they choose for the annotation. So though they're free items online, some faculty like the notes that accompany other versions.
Okay. Yeah.
That's one of the things I've liked about the literature online package, because it's more modern edition. So, for example, they now have all the Penguin introductions, all the Penguin editions are available in full text, or like the Knoxville Community Library and some others that we've got a database of all these recordings, so students don't have to buy their own set of recordings.
Yeah.
So there's something that some of those things are a little hidden sometimes. If they're not right in your discipline, you might not be aware of them.
So I feel like a great example of this, Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, he produced, like, in his own lifetime, I want to say like 6 to 8 editions. And then on top of that, it's like every decade new scholars produce something with new annotations or this or that. And I mean, you can never just have one copy of that book if you're a student. If it's taught again, it will be a different edition. So yeah, I think that's a good point, that sometimes it comes down to what edition a professor prefers. Well, all right, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. But this guide is libraryguides.missouri.edu/open educational resources. /OER was taken. I'm going to look into finding what took that and maybe take it back. But yeah, it's up there, and if you're interested in joining the OER interest group or our listserv, it's the resources on campus tab down at the bottom. My email address is there. Go ahead and email me. Thank you all for attending. Thanks for presenting. All right.
Librarian